Welcome to Battleground, Nevada. I'm your host, Ben Marjat, a reporter at KRNV News 4 in Reno. I'm passionate about making politics in this critical battleground state more digestible to the average voter and pushing past the talking points to press politicians for answers. On this show, we take deep dives into the people, ideas, and debates shaping Silver State politics. One more week. Election Day 2024 is right around the corner. I just got a pit in my stomach thinking about that. Here at Battleground, Nevada, we're trying to bring you every angle of this insane election cycle, and that's why we're coming to you with a new episode on a Monday. There is just too much to get to. We couldn't wait until our regular Wednesday show. We have an absolutely jam-packed episode for you today. First, we'll take you out to the Silver Legacy in downtown Reno to J.D. Vance's second campaign rally in the biggest little city, where he actually opened it up to questions for local media at the end, and we got to ask one. Then thousands upon thousands of votes are already being cast both in person during early voting and, of course, by mail. An update on early voting and the major trends we've noticed so far. Then, our interview with Dr. Don Levy, the director of the Siena College Research Institute, one of the nation's leading political pollsters. Last episode, we talked about new polling on how Nevadans felt about the most important election issues. This time, we're talking horse race, the New York Times and Siena College's final national poll before Election Day, and what it all means. Plus, we've interviewed 40 or so voters over the last month or so for a segment we've called Voice of the Voter. We went to Reno, Carson City, and Sparks to ask locals one simple question: what's the issue that matters most to you in this election? And finally, our last fact-checking segment, where we examine the claims and add context to all the ads you're seeing on our airwaves. This time, a closer look at two ads, one for and against GOP Senate nominee Sam Brown. Okay, so much to get to, so we won't wait any longer. Let's take you out to the J.D. Vance rally held on Wednesday in downtown Reno.
It is great to be in Reno, Nevada. She goes around the country and she says things like, on day one, we're going to tackle the affordability crisis affecting our families. And on day one, we are going to secure the southern border. And I think all of us with a lick of common sense have been thinking to ourselves, Kamala, day one was 1,400 days ago. What the hell have you been doing the whole time? The reason housing is so expensive is because there's too little houses being built and there are too many illegal aliens in this country going after homes that ought by rights go to American citizens. Let's talk about both. American homes for the American people, not for illegal aliens who don't deserve to be in this country in the first place.
If elected, what specifically would you do to prevent transgender women from playing in women's sports? Because in Nevada, the University of Reno's president, a Republican, we might add, says that it's against the Nevada Constitution to forfeit a game for reasons related to gender identity.
You have to make clear that Title IX protects the interests of our young girls instead of facilitating the destruction of girls' sports. That's all you have to do. Title IX. Now, maybe we have to amend the law, or maybe it's just a matter of enforcement, but we've got to make clear that Title IX protects the rights of our young girls to compete against young girls. God bless you guys. Thank you, Nevada. We'll see you soon.
That makes 2 Northern Nevada visits for Vance, 2 for his Democratic counterpart Tim Walz, 1 visit from former President Donald Trump, and Kamala Harris is making her first stop here on Halloween. She's planning to hold a campaign rally in Reno on Thursday. Of course, we'll have full coverage of that event later this week. Over 643,000 Nevadans have already voted in this election, either by mail or in person in early voting. That figure includes 244,000 Democrats, 256,000 Republicans, and 164,000 nonpartisans and members of third parties as of Monday morning. That's all according to the Nevada Secretary of State's office. Total turnout is at 32.6%, and registered Republicans continue to show up in higher numbers so far. They're up by about 5% on Democrats, or about 32,000 ballots cast. As a reminder, as always, these are not results, just the party affiliation of the people that have voted so far. While Democrats have slowed the bleeding in recent days, Republicans continue to pad that lead through the early vote period. It's a complete flip from what we've seen in previous cycles, where Democrats jump out to a big lead and then Republicans close the gap on Election Day. We hope to dig deeper on those numbers later this week in another segment, so stay tuned. Okay, we've got a great interview for you this week. Dr. Don Levy, the director of the Siena College Research Institute. He oversees all of the college's political and economic polls, and they're one of the nation's best pollsters, and they just released their final national poll on Friday. We're so grateful Dr. Levy made time for us amid everything else going on in his world. We asked what their deadlocked Trump-Harris poll means, what that poll can't tell us, how they've adjusted for non-response bias in recent years, and a lot more. Here's our chat with Don Levy. Dr. Don Levy, the director of the Siena College Research Institute, giving us some of his time in a very busy time for the college and for the polling firm. Don, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be with you.
For our audience who might not know, Siena College, one of the nation's preeminent pollsters, you guys are kind of the gold standard. And so when your poll with the New York Times came out on Friday, that's one that everyone kind of in the political world make sure to read that poll very closely. So, final national poll that Siena College released on Friday before Election Day. What did that poll find?
Well, it can't get any closer. Our numbers right now are 48% for former President Donald Trump, 48% for Vice President Kamala Harris, still about 4% who say that they are undecided. They can't simply make up their mind. Another about 6% say that they might switch. So there are still about 1 in 10 voters who remain in play. Interesting, as close as the race is overall nationally, and as close as it is in all the battleground states, and of course Nevada being one of those battleground states, when you look under the hood, you see tremendous difference within various subgroups. So for example, just the simplest one, the gender divide. A majority of men say that they are for Donald Trump. A majority of women say they are for Kamala Harris. Some of those people, live in the same house. Another group of voters that are very important, white voters without a college education. There, Donald Trump has a 30 to 35 point advantage. And those voters come into play certainly in all the battleground states. Voters of color. Certainly black voters, a lot has been made of that constituency. Initially during the campaign, there was concern on the Democratic side and some optimism on the Republican side that some of those voters were moving towards Donald Trump. They seem in our most recent poll to have returned to the Democratic fold. And so right now, Harris has a very large lead, 81% to 12% amongst black voters. And of course, Latino voters. As we all well know, Latinos are not a monolithic group. They vary by any number of different characteristics, generations here in the country, so on and so forth. But Latinos, certainly we have seen in this cycle a greater tendency amongst Latino voters to embrace the Trump ticket. So what had been a large lead for the Democrats has now shrunk to about a 15-point advantage amongst that group. So what we're seeing is that at this point in the race, overall, we're looking at a tied race, but it really is going to depend on which of these subgroups, many of these subgroups who favor one candidate over the other by large double-digit margins, which of them are going to turn out at rates greater than or perhaps less than the rate that they have turned out in previous years, or the rate at which either the campaigns or we as pollsters anticipate that they're going to turn out.
Interesting, and it'll also come down to, more specifically, the polls in the 7 battleground states, which we are expecting more from Siena College and others soon. What was the change you guys did a recent poll early October. Harris was up by 3 points on the former president in that poll. Should we take that to mean that she has slipped a little bit since then, or is that within the margin of the error and kind of a shift that we might expect that we shouldn't look too much into?
Well, certainly what we have seen in many of our polls over the course of October is that former President Donald Trump has closed the gap a little bit nationally. and in some cases has moved it to each and every one of the battleground states is now a toss-up. Right now, the polling average in Nevada is that we have Trump up by less than 1 point. That's when you take a look at all the recent polling. Senator Rosen up by more, close to 5 points over the challenger for the race there, Brown. But at this point in time, we have seen the race move ever so slightly in Trump's direction. But really, right now, one of the two candidates could win all 7 of the battleground states or lose all 7 of the battleground states.
Wow.
There is no clear advantage for one candidate over the other. The only state that we're tracking that Donald Trump seems to have a lead that borders with being outside the margin of error is your neighbor, Arizona, where we've consistently had Trump up by 4 to 5 points over Harris. The rest, toss-up.
Wow. Okay. I'll take you back to 2016 a little bit when, as we all know, there was a large polling error, not just Siena College. Every pollster essentially missed that race. We all thought Hillary Clinton was going to win that race, and there was many factors that contributed to that, but one of them being this non-response bias where Trump voters, right, were more likely to not respond to a poll. I don't want to get too scientific for our audience here, but explain briefly how pollsters like Siena College are kind of adjusting for that, expecting that a little bit, and what you do to kind of adjust so the polls can reflect that to some extent.
Sure. To give a little bit of context, most especially in 2020, we found that in areas that Donald Trump carried by the largest margins, it was voters who backed him who tended to say, I don't really want to talk to a pollster. Perhaps, that owes in part to Donald Trump's tendency to call all aspects of the media, whether it's what you do or what I do, as fake news. But there was a tendency for that voter to not respond. So fast forward to today, and coincidentally, I'll point out that in 2022, when Donald Trump was not on the ballot, our polling rate of predictive efficiency was off the charts. We got virtually every single race right. So what are we doing right now? A couple of things that we're doing is we are a phone shop. We're calling people back more times in order to ask them for their opinions. So we take a smaller sample to start with, and we call each respondent more times with the belief that the more times I call you, sooner or later, even if you are a non-responder, I'm going to get you to participate. Also, in 2020, if someone yelled at us, we got on the phone, hi, this is Don, asking you a short survey, and they simply yelled at us, Trump, and hung up, they didn't count. We didn't know what to do with them. We kept track of them. We didn't count them in our estimates. Now we do count them. In fact, we went back in 2020, and had we counted all those folks who just simply yelled a choice at us and hung up, it would have moved our polling about a point to a point and a half in the direction of Donald Trump, and would have eliminated a fair amount of the error that we as a shop had in our polling. And then finally, we quota. So when we call Nevada, we divide the state into multiple regions. We divide each region into people by virtue of their race, ethnicity, their age, their educational level. And we seek to fill those small but really important quotas of people. So we're a little bit more rigorous. We take more time. We call people back more, and we count those people who yell at us, all with an effort to get as representative a sample, whether it be of folks from Nevada or of any of the other battleground states here in this pivotal election in 2024.
So if Don or Siena College is calling, pick up the phone, answer a couple questions. It'll make all those polls a little more accurate. One last one before we let you go, Don. What can the polls tell us a week out from Election Day, and what can polls not tell us a week out from Election Day, because it's just the limitations of this industry?
Well, sure. I mean, we have been accused at various points of influencing the outcome of the election. If we poll a race and we say one candidate is 10 points over the other, then we'll get criticism that the supporters of the candidate trailing, they give up, they don't show. Well, that's certainly not the case in this election. I think what we're showing, whether it be the New York Times Siena poll or other reputable pollsters, is that this one is too close to call. Your vote matters. And as residents of a battleground state, your vote really matters. We also show people that Americans are not all the same. We tend to, as people, believe that other people ought to believe and behave the way we do and the way our friends and family do. What polling does is show that there is tremendous variation across the state, across America. So we draw a picture of that and we give it back to you. We also feel as though, as we poll not just the horse race, who's going to win, but the issues, we're asking you to think about those issues, whether that be the economy, preservation of our democracy, immigration, abortion, and we demonstrate how various Americans have differing opinions on those issues. And we ask you to think through that, to decide for yourself. And in this case, to vote based on not just the personality of the candidates, not even just their character, but whether they stand on the issues where you stand in this representative democracy. So we feel as though we contribute to that representative democracy that I think we all cherish.
We do appreciate the hard work of Siena College and you, the director there, Don. Thank you so much for giving us some time today. Keep the faith here in this final week, and best of luck. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you very much.
A special thanks to Don Levy for joining Battleground Nevada. This cycle, we wanted to get a pulse, so to speak, of how voters are feeling, what's weighing heavily on their minds as we approach Election Day. As I said earlier, we did 3 Voice of the Voter segments, talking to a few dozen voters all over northern Nevada. We asked them all the same question: what's the issue that matters most to you this election? Their answers run the gamut. We thought it was useful to hear from the people that will be deciding these contests in their own words. We went to the Truckee River in downtown Reno, then downtown Carson City, and finally heard from folks at the Sparks Marina. Here's what they had to say.
The number one issue for me this election is saving our democracy. It's plain and simple. January 6th, the efforts to overthrow the last election, all that kind of stuff.
Unemployment took almost a month and a half to actually get cleared through. Half of my bills are behind. I'm struggling with rent.
Maybe just helping out the homeless, like finding better places for them, shelters, halfway houses. Just it seems like there's a lot of places that aren't getting enough funding. I'd like to see them get the proper stability they need.
The uncontrolled border. I'd like to see finally the wall finished and people have to pay for the illegals, their health care and everything else that they get for free.
The guy is a felon and he has lied to the public. What else do you need?
Helping the homeless people they need, families they don't make it too much money. I would like to see them to get help.
Question 3, which is ranked choice voting. I'm a nonpartisan voter, have been for quite some time. I don't like closed primaries. I want to be able to participate in my elections like anybody else can.
Climate change, probably one of the biggest issues affecting not only our generation, but those to come.
Coming together as a country. Because in order to get through all these trials and tribulations, I think we're going to need to have more of a bipartisanship.
Reproduction rights. It's very important. White male has no room or bargaining to dictate what a woman does with her body.
With the way things are in the economy, inflation, rising cost of groceries, food, and affordable childcare, because we're looking at daycare and options like that right now, we can't afford it.
Personally, I cannot get by January 6th, and I never will. That to me was just so abhorrent and ridiculous and wrong.
We need to pay attention to the seniors. They're on limited means. We need to make sure we have pensions. We need to make sure we have retirement.
Immigration and the economy. Because the bell pepper shouldn't cost $5. And because we got to keep our borders safe. There's too many illegals coming in.
You know, economy, the borders, and getting rid of lifers in Congress. Why does the taxpayer have to pay for them for the rest of their lives?
Deregulating by the federal government through the public education system. Kids have been getting dumber and dumber ever since the 70s. Education is lacking. I think that the federal government should only be in charge of national defense.
The character of the person or people that I'm voting for. He's the one that started it, I think, and a lot of people jumped on that bandwagon, and I find it off-putting and dangerous.
That we all stay alive and that we learn to accept other people's opinions and beliefs.
Maintaining democracy. Well, I remember what happened on January 6th. Just peace and hope and having a leader
that speaks in that way.
You know, it's the economy. Just about everything's gone up. Anybody that goes to the store today, and then if you had the receipt from last year, it's going to be drastically different. You know, I mean, I see it.
Inflation, prices of everything through the roof of it, as everybody knows, and things need to go back down again. Just food and gas and bills, and everything's going up. One thing goes up, everything goes up.
Just keeping democracy. I really want everybody's voice to be heard. I want America to be America again, and I just want to keep things affordable.
If the economy isn't right, nothing else will be right. And then integrity. Trump has more integrity, but not by a wide margin.
I think lower prices, lower rent, lower interest rates, groceries, medicines, food, all the important things.
Well, the one thing that's really bothering me is how much the candidates slam each other. Yeah. And that's all I seem to hear is the negative, and I don't see any of the positive.
Just the ongoing survival of our democracy. Because if it doesn't survive, I don't know that I want to live here. I feel like the other side would start infringing on individual rights that would ultimately threaten the republic. It's a slow hill.
Character. I want a president that's sound character, that's for the people, not for himself. I don't want somebody that shreds the truth.
Before we go, we've got our final fact-checking segment. If you've missed them before, we're providing context and clarity to the sometimes confusing, misleading, and downright false commercials you just can't escape right now. We hate to make you listen to them again, but we hope our fact checks are worth it because these ads all deserve to be scrutinized. This time we've got two ads, one for and one against GOP Senate nominee Sam Brown. He's focused much of his paid advertising on the high price of consumer goods like food and gas, as well as Trump's proposal, later adopted by Harris, to end tax on tips. Here's his 30-second spot called That's Why.
Sam Brown is more than a West Point graduate and veteran. He's one of us. Sam worked in a warehouse while starting a business to deliver veterans their medications. He knows what it costs to provide for a family. We need him in the Senate to lower prices on food, fuel, and prescription drugs, make housing more affordable, and end taxes on tips and Social Security benefits.
I'm Sam Brown, and I approve this message.
So as you heard there, he vows to lower prices on food, prescriptions, and gas, make housing more affordable, and end taxes on tips and Social Security benefits. As for lowering prices on goods, the specifics on how he would do that aren't fleshed out aside from a general statement on his website to, quote, stop the reckless spending in Washington. And he says he wants to create better energy and monetary policies that lower costs for the production and transportation of goods, but doesn't list any specifics. As for housing, he supports freeing up federal lands with a lands bill, a policy also supported and sponsored in the Senate now by Senator Jackie Rosen, as well as cutting regulations that he says will slow down housing projects. And yes, he supports ending taxes on tips and Social Security benefits. Brown says he'll work to save Social Security and Medicare. Now, he did once say he admired Florida Senator Rick Scott's attempt to craft a vision for the Republican Party with a bill that likely would have resulted in cuts to Medicare, but PolitiFact has rated Jackie Rosen's claims that Brown supports massive cuts to those safety net programs as mostly false. All right, you may have seen this next ad from the Democratic Super PAC Win Senate. It's a 30-second spot labeling Brown as Scam Brown. Let's listen.
The oldest scams in Vegas make them think one thing and pull off another. Meet Sam Brown, or as Republicans call him, Scam Brown. Brown created a special fundraising committee he said would be used to elect Republicans. But instead, Brown pocketed money for his own campaign. In fact, fewer than 2% went to helping other candidates. Sam Brown. Can't trust him to be for you. Win Senate is responsible for the content of this ad.
So as you heard, it alleges Brown created a special fundraising committee to help Republicans get elected, but very little of the money raised actually went to GOP candidates. CNN analyzed all the Federal Election Commission filings by this PAC called Duty First. And yes, they found of all the money raised, less than 7% went to candidates. And when you consider Brown's personal loans, debt the PAC took on from Brown's campaign, and expenditures, fewer than 2% of the PAC's funds went toward candidates in 2022. The majority of the money raised repaid debt from Brown's failed primary campaign for Senate back in 2022. A spokesperson for his campaign told CNN, quote, "The PAC promised to support conservative candidates in Nevada, and it did exactly that by donating to every Republican candidate in Nevada's federal races during the 2022 general election," they said. "We reached out to the Brown campaign ourselves for comment on both of those ads and didn't hear back." We've fact-checked 6 other commercials in this Senate race, as well as ads on Question 3 and the race for Nevada's 2nd Congressional District. They're in previous episodes from the last month, and we'll link to the full web stories in the show notes. All right, you know the drill by now. If you haven't voted already, get out and do your civic duty. We have links to every early voting polling place in the Silver State down in the show notes. Again, it's crazy right now, so not sure exactly when, but we do hope to have another episode in this feed later this week. So keep checking back as we try and stay on top of all this election news for you. If you made it to the end of this show, we really appreciate it. If you have guest ideas, episode ideas, questions, comments, compliments, concerns, shoot us an email. We'd love to hear from you. My email is bjmargiot, MARGIOTT, @sbgtv.com. Put ballot Battleground Nevada in the subject line. And if you have a moment, we'd really appreciate if you left a rating and a review so more people can discover Ballot Battleground Nevada. Thanks for listening.